One Cold Case Project back again, and today we are going to discuss the case of the I70 killer. Now, I discussed this case a few months back, but wanted to make a little bit of a longer video where we can just go over some more details of what happened, discuss the additional two suspects that are known in this case as well too. So let's get ready to dive into this case. As I always say, if you enjoy the content I share on this channel, please throw me a like down below. In addition, give me your thoughts on this case. Leave me a comment down below. And also, please make sure that you subscribe as I publish brand new content each and every day for you. So, that said, let's all get started. Now, the I-70 killer is an unidentified serial killer who attacked six store clerks in the Midwestern states in the spring of 1992. Now, it's also believed he's also responsible for three additional shootings and two murders in Texas between 1993 and 1994. Now, he's called the I-70 killer because, as you see by this map here, all of the stores where someone was murdered were essentially all close to the Interstate 70, which ran through, as you see, from Indiana down to Missouri down to Kansas. Now, his victims were generally young, petite brunettes. Now, one victim was a man. However, most people feel the reason he was picked out was he possibly saw the guy from behind. And he had his hair was very long, and he had it in a ponytail. It wasn't like these were big money robberies, as these were generally small non-franchise stores that had maybe $100 or a couple $100 in the safe, or in the cash register. Now, with all that said, there has been some publicity of this case back between the 90s and the 2000s. This case was covered on Unsolved Mysteries as well as the TV show Dark Minds. Now, let's rewind back to 1992. Now, the killing spree started on April the 8th with the murder of 26-year-old Payless shoe source manager Robin Fuldauer in Indianapolis. She was alone in the store when she was shot, having been murdered sometime between 1:30 and 2 p.m. Now, from here, fast forward a couple of days. The next two murders occurred on April the 11th at the La Bride Elegance Bridal Shop in Wichita. The victims were Patricia Smith and the store's owner, Patricia Majors. As this was the only case involving multiple victims, investigators believed the killer was under the impression that there was only one woman in the store. The women stayed past the normal closing time of 6 p.m. to allow a male customer to pick up a cummerbund. Sometime after 6 p.m., the women allowed the killer into the store, thinking he was the customer they were waiting for. After the women were murdered, the actual customer arrived to pick up the cummerbund. He actually came face to face with the killer. After a little bit of talking and a little wheeling and dealing, the killer actually let the man go. And the customer was able to not only get out of there, he also helped provide the sketch that is probably the most popular sketch that's known to be out there of the I-70 suspect. Now, let's move forward a little over 2 weeks, and that onto April the 27th, and that would be when Michael McCown is murdered at his mother Sylvia's ceramic store in Terre Haute, Indiana. McCown was the only man killed during the spree, and it's believed by investigators the I-70 killer chose the store because the store's solo woman's name, Sylvia's, seemed to make it a good target, because McCown also had his hair in a ponytail and was shot from behind while he was kneeling stocking shelves. He may have been mistaken for a woman. Now, a week later, on May the 4th, 24-year-old Nancy Kitzmiller was killed while working alone at Boot Village, a footwear shop in St. Charles, Missouri. She opened up the shop at noon and was found dead by customers at 2:30 p.m. Now, the last known murder occurred 3 days later on May the 7th in Raytown, Missouri. The victim was 37-year-old Sarah Blessing, who was working in her gift shop, store of many colors. The murder occurred during the day, and the owner of the store next to Blessing's shop saw the killer enter the shop, heard a pop, and then saw him leave. He discovered Blessing's body after checking to see what occurred in the store. Clerk at a nearby grocery store also saw the suspect. He was climbing a hill towards I-70. Now, as we fast forward on to 1993, some investigators believe the I-70 killer may be responsible for 2 murders in 1993 and an attempted murder in 1994, all of which occurred in Texas. The 2 murder victims were 51-year-old Mary Ann Glasscock, who was murdered on September the 25th of 1993 in Fort Worth, the Emporium Antique Store, and 22-year-old Amy Vess, who was shot to death at a dance apparel store in Arlington on November the 1st. Now, the lone survivor was Vicky Webb, who was shot on January the 15th in 1994 in Houston at the Alternatives gift shop. She briefly talked to the shooter before he shot her in the back of the head. The bullet did not, however, penetrate into Webb's head due to a large vertebrae being hit. The shooter attempted to shoot her again, but his gun misfired. He left, presuming Webb was already dead. The modus operandi of the Texas killer was very similar to that of the I-70 killer, and he used a .22 caliber firearm, same as the I-70 killer. A ballistics test determined the gun that was used in the Texas murders was not the same as the one used in the I-70 killings, however. So some investigators have not been able to confirm the I-70 killers responsible for the shootings in Texas. As an investigation went on, the murders were conclusively linked after a St. Charles detective suspected a connection. All the murders were committed with a .22 caliber firearm, and the victims were usually petite young women with long dark hair. Aside from the Wichita murders, all the victims were alone. All were shot in the back of the head. None of the scenes had any signs of sexual assault, and while all stores were robbed, robbery appeared to be a secondary motive, as all stores were small specialty businesses, which didn't have any money. Murders took place at slow times of the day when the stores were deserted, such as after lunch or around closing time. They were all in strip malls near I-70. Based on witness testimonies, police strongly believe the murder weapon may have been a Scorpion pistol or an Irma Werke ET-22 pistol. They have not, however, been able to rule out any other .22 caliber firearm models. The ammunition used in the killings was .22 caliber CCI copper-clad lead bullets. The castings for the cartridges showed traces of jeweler's rouge. Midwest authorities linked the killings to the shootings in Texas in 1994, but Texas authorities were not convinced of the connection, as different guns were used during the killings in each spree. Based on witness descriptions, investigators were able to produce 2 composite sketches of the killer and a physical description of the suspect. The I-70 killer was described as being a white male, either in his 20s or 30s, about 5'7" or 5'9", with thin, lazy eyelids and sandy blonde hair, possibly reddish in 1992. If he's still alive, he would be in his 50s or late 40s. Police have not publicly identified any suspects, and the case has been classified as a cold case. Now, a couple popular theories in this case for who could be potentially a suspect in these killings is one man by the name of Baumeister. Now, For those of you not familiar with the name Herb Baumeister, he was a successful Indianapolis area businessman who owned some retail shops. And while at home, he was a father of two children and a husband. He also parlayed that into a nightlife where he was picking up homosexual men and engaging in sexual acts where he was also asphyxiating them and killing them. Now, all that said, all that said, the composite sketch, the police, with the composite sketch, police did think that this could be possibly leading to Baumeister in Westfield, Indiana. He was known to travel very frequently, and what happened next created a shock of terror that was entirely unexpected. As police began searching his property, they uncovered a vast amount of skeletal remains that totaled 12 bodies. However, they were all male, believed to be homosexual. Out of the 11, eight of them were reported missing. Now, shortly after this, Baumeister committed suicide. It was learned that he had throat cancer, but was currently in remission at the time. He owned a 22 semi-automatic, which further gained belief that he could be the I-70 killer. Unfortunately, although the suspect as the I-70 killer, there were no female remains on his property. With his suicide, it's unknown whether or not he allegedly had any involvement in the murders of the women. Nevertheless, the police were able to solve the cases of the missing men. However, with all that said, they never really were able to trace to see if he actually had anything to do with these killings. Just the disappearances of gay men in the Indiana area throughout the early 1990s. While Baumeister was one of the main people who was discussed, despite the fact, as we said, murdering women was never necessarily his MO, it was always guys. Another suspect came out soon thereafter, a few years thereafter. Now, the man in this photograph you're going to see here is Neal Falls. You're going to see a photograph to the left of what he looked like in the early 1990s when he would have been in his early 20s. Now, fast forward to July the 18th of 2015. Neal Falls was shot and killed by a woman he attempted to attack in her own home. Little did I know that Pandora's box had opened. Inside the trunk, investigators found what seemed to be a serial killer's kill kit. Plastic tubs, cleaning supplies, trash bags, and various weapons were among these items they seized from his car. Since then, I have dedicated a piecing together of this man's life and uncovered many of his secrets. Throughout the years, Falls has been speculated to have been a suspect in multiple homicides committed by unknown serial killers. This is really not a theory. No one's really brings up Neal Falls in this case, but I think is a very interesting suspect in my own personal opinion. One of these cases, as I'm saying right now, is the 5 women and single male killed in the Midwest in the I-70 killings. Now, all that said, Falls' family was connected to Kansas. He had a habit throughout his life. He died, I believe, at about 45 years old, and he was known to frequently take cross country road trips. And his time at the time of the killing spree was, as I said, he was in his early 20s. Now, all that said, there's very little information about this man. They've connected him to some killings that took place in Las Vegas. They haven't convicted him, but they do believe he was responsible for murders of some prostitutes that were murdered in the Vegas area in the early 2000s. Now, while I'm saying this man has kind of a striking resemblance, if you look at these pictures of him, we really don't have anything clad. Furthermore, we're also kind of stretching with the fact that this man was known for murdering sex workers as his prey. Could this have been maybe his entry game into how he got started killing? We don't know. Just speculation, but like I said, being a bit of a serial killer, being a bit of a crime junkie myself, I like to try to think, could this person be connected or not? So, with all this said, and a couple suspects as I did talk about, still to this day, what I told you happened in the 1990s is really about it. I don't believe there's any known ballistics that were ever conducted on guns owned by, if they ever did any, you know, checking on the bullets that would have been fired from that could have come from Baumeister's gun. If any work of that, for that matter, was done to weapons that Neal Falls had. So, for all we know, this case could possibly be unsolved for a very long time. And with, I mean, no sexual assault being a motive, furthermore, this really gives you reason to feel this case could possibly be cold for a very long time. Now, with all that said, as I usually do, I would like us to give a brief moment of silence for the 6 victims who lost their life, as well as in 1982, as well as the 2 victims who lost their life in 1993. All right, everyone. So that about wraps it up for the my rundown of the I70 killings. What's your thoughts? Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think. That said, stay tuned. Got a bunch more content coming on down. So thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.